When I first arrived at 83 Hawthorne Street, the rain was falling. Indiana, that quiet, insistent way that makes you feel like the world is whispering secrets just out of reach. My boxes were damp. My hair was plastered to my neck. And yet, as I stood in the creaky old hallway of the third floor, staring at the chipped numbers on my new door 3A, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. After everything that happened back home, all I wanted was silence, a place to breathe, to disappear for a while. The city had offered that. This old building, with its ivy-covered bricks and brass doorknobs dulled by time, felt like it held stories, forgotten ones. That suited me just fine. I didn't want anyone asking about mine. Dragging the last box inside, I pushed the door shut behind me. The apartment was quaint. High ceilings. Wooden floors that creaked under my steps. A clawfoot tub. The windows let in the kind of gray light that makes everything feel like a faded photograph. I dropped my keys in a bowl, exhaled deeply, and began to unpack. I noticed the door across the hall 3B only later, when I stepped out to toss some packing paper into the bin by the stairwell. The hallway was empty, hushed. But 3B's door was different. It was darker, scratched, like it had seen more knocks than welcome. There was no doormat. No decoration. Just a small peephole, and a silence that felt heavier than the others. I didn't think much of it. Until midnight. I had just settled into bed with a cup of chamomile tea and an old paperback when I heard it, a soft sound. A whisper of paper sliding against the floor. I sat up, heart ticking just a little faster. Listened. Silence. I padded to the door, barefoot on cool wood, and peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. But when I opened the door, something fluttered by my feet. A folded piece of paper. No envelope. No name. Just a few words written in neat, precise handwriting. Welcome, Lena. Be careful who you trust. T. I stared at it for a long time, the words sinking into me like cold water. I hadn't told anyone I'd moved in. No friends in this city. No family, either. Just me, and now, a stranger who apparently knew my name. Across the hall, the door to 3B remained shut. Unmoving. Quiet. I kept the note. I told myself I should throw it away, that it was probably some strange neighbor's version of a joke, a weird initiation into the quirks of city living. But instead, I slid it into the drawer of my bedside table like it meant something. Like it mattered. The next morning, I asked the building manager about apartment 3B. Oh, that one. Mr. Alden, a stooped man in a cardigan too big for his frame, scratched the back of his neck. That tenant's been here longer than I have. Quiet fellow. Keeps to himself. I don't think he's left that apartment in years. Years? He pays rent, Mr. Alden shrugged. Never causes trouble. Let him be. Let him be. Easier said than done. Especially when, that night, another note slid under my door. I hadn't even realized I was waiting for it until I heard the faint, familiar scratch across the wood. I froze, heart skipping, and walked slowly to the door. The hallway was silent, same as before. I picked up the paper. You look sad today. I hope you like chamomile. It suits you. Tea. I swallowed. I had made exactly 1 cup of tea, behind closed blinds. I hadn't stepped outside all day. No one should have seen me. No one should have known. I locked the door and triple-checked it this time. But later, when I sat in bed with that note resting in my palm, the fear faded into something else. Curiosity. I grabbed a pen and a scrap of lined paper from my journal. I stared at it for a long time before finally writing. Why are you watching me? I hesitated. Then added. And how do you know my name? L. It felt ridiculous, childish even, sliding the note across the floor and pushing it under 3B's door like some middle school secret. But I did it anyway. And I waited. The next night, the reply came. I'm not watching. I notice. There's a difference. I heard your name when the movers arrived. You told them. I remembered. I don't leave my apartment. But I see more than most people do. I'm sorry if I scared you. T. I read the note 3 times. Then once more in bed, lying on my side in the soft light of the bedside lamp, as if the ink might change under the warmth. He hadn't denied it. He didn't pretend to be someone else. And strangest of all, I didn't feel afraid. Not yet. The following nights became a rhythm. Every evening, around the same time, a note would appear. Short ones. Long ones. Observations. Thoughts. Sometimes quotes from books, lines of poetry. Always signed simply, T. And I began writing back. I didn't know why. Maybe because the silence of this city was deeper than I expected. Maybe because being noticed even by a stranger I'd never seen felt more like comfort than danger. But mostly, it was the words. They were gentle. Thoughtful. The kind you underline in a book and fold the page for. He wrote. Do you ever feel like the walls remember who we used to be? And I replied. I think they remember who we tried not to be. It was easy to forget, in the daylight, that I was writing to a man I'd never seen. That across the hall was a locked door, and behind it, someone who hadn't left in years. Someone I was beginning to feel, strangely close to. It started with the absence of music. Every evening, like clockwork, I'd hear the soft hum of jazz slipping through the walls from apartment 2C. Harper, early 20s, curly hair always in a messy bun, was the kind of neighbor who smiled at everyone and left a trail of citrus perfume wherever she went. She played Ella Fitzgerald at night while she cooked. Sometimes she sang along, slightly off-key, full of joy. Then one night, the music stopped. I didn't think much of it at first. People come and go. Maybe she was out late. Maybe she had company. But then it was 2 nights. Then 3. Her mailbox downstairs overflowed. Packages were stacked by her door. No footsteps. No light under the crack. Just silence. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I wrote to Theo that night. Do you know Harper from 2C? She hasn't been around lately. Do you see her? The reply didn't come at midnight, like usual. It came at 3:17 a.m. Stop asking questions, Lena. They're listening. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. My fingers trembled as I reread the words. This wasn't poetry. This wasn't sweet or distant. It was sharp. Urgent. Scared. I wrote back. Who's listening? Theo, what's going on? No answer. The next morning, I knocked on Harper's door. No reply. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. I told myself it was none of my business, that people disappear in cities all the time, especially when they don't want to be found. But then I noticed it's something small. Something strange. Her scarf. Folded and wet, lying in the hallway corner, partially tucked behind the baseboard heater. The one she wore almost every day. Pale yellow with stitched sunflowers. I bent down and picked it up. Cold. Damp. Smelled like rain. Like it had been outside. But Harper hadn't left the building. I clutched it tightly and stepped back into my apartment. And there, waiting under my door, was a new note. I hadn't even heard it slide in. Stop looking, Lena. Next time, it'll be you. No signature. Just those words, chilling, threatening, final. I stared at the note, my back pressed against the door, the walls around me suddenly feeling too close. For the first time, I questioned everything. Was Theo trying to protect me, or was he the one I needed protection from? And if he wasn't the one sending that last note, then who was? I didn't sleep that night. The note sat on my kitchen counter, taunting me under the pale light of the stove lamp. Next time, it'll be you. My name wasn't on it. And that silence, the lack of Theo's signature, felt like a scream. By morning, I couldn't decide what scared me more, that someone was threatening me, or that Theo had gone quiet. No note. No reply. Nothing. I waited all day, pacing the floor, pretending to clean. The walls creaked with every gust of wind. The radiator hissed. A shadow passed under my door once, but when I opened it, the hallway was empty again. This building, so full of charm when I moved in, was beginning to feel like a mouth slowly closing around me. By evening, I'd made up my mind. I needed answers about Harper, about the building, about Theo. So I went downstairs to the mailroom and pulled open the rusted file cabinet marked Tenant Records. I doubted I'd find much, but it was worth a try. Inside were dog-eared lease agreements, faded bills, and scattered complaints. Most had water damage or torn corners. I flipped through them until I found it. Apartment 3B, Theodore Hale. Lease start date, 2015. No emergency contact. No employment info. Rent paid in cash, every month. But below that, I found something else older, taped to the back of the page. Complaint filed, 2016. Strange smells. Whispers in the hallway. Tenant in 3B never opens the door. Then a name, Detective M. Reyes, report filed but closed. I stood in the middle of the room, heart drumming in my ears. Someone had already looked into him. Someone had tried. But what had they found? When I returned to my floor, I found a new note. I hadn't heard it. Hadn't expected it. Just 4 words, in familiar ink. Don't go downstairs alone. This one was signed, T. That night, the building lost power. It started with a flicker. Then another. Then silence. The hallway went black. My phone was dead, of course it was. I stood by the peephole for nearly an hour, but saw nothing but shadows. The emergency light at the stairwell door flickered faintly, barely illuminating the corridor. I should have stayed inside. But I needed to know if Theo was okay. I stepped into the hallway, the floor cool beneath my bare feet. Each step echoed. Apartment 3B remained still. I crouched and slid a note under his door. Theo, please say something. I don't know what to believe. As I stood up, I heard it. A soft, deliberate creak behind me. I turned. Nothing. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, someone watching. The stairwell door at the far end of the hall swung open, slowly, as if pushed. I backed toward my door, breath catching. Then another sound, paper sliding against wood. A note. I lunged, grabbed it from the floor, and slammed my door shut. It read: You weren't supposed to see this. Now you can't leave. No signature. And I realized, with a sinking cold inside my chest, this one wasn't from Theo. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I sat on the floor with the latest note clenched in my hand, rereading each of Theo's older letters like they might offer protection, like if I could just understand his words better, I'd know what was happening. What I was caught in. But there were no answers in ink. Just echoes of a man who knew too much, and said too little. By morning, the power had returned. But the air felt heavier than before, like the building had exhaled something it had been holding in for years. I couldn't wait anymore. If Theo wouldn't open his door, I'd find another way in. I watched apartment 3B the way he used to watch me. At 4:13 p.m., the lock clicked. A man's hand emerged, pale, slow, grabbing the mail Mr. Alden had dropped outside his door. That was all. A flicker of movement. A whisper of presence. But it meant something. He was real. That night, I left one final note. If you don't let me in, someone else already has. And they're trying to hurt me. Please. I didn't expect a reply. But at 11:58 p.m., I heard it. Click. My door creaked open before I even realized I was moving. Across the hall, 3B stood ajar. No note. Just silence. And an invitation. I stepped inside. The apartment was dark, but not unwelcoming. It smelled of old books, of dust, and something warm like cinnamon and paper. The walls were covered in them. Notes. Letters. Clippings. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All pinned in overlapping layers. Some typed. Some scrawled in Theo's familiar handwriting. I stepped closer, heart thudding, scanning the chaos. Lena 3A. Moved in June 12. Smiles politely. Favors chamomile. Hums when nervous. Watched by someone else. Danger. 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 My stomach twisted. Then, I heard his voice. Don't touch anything. I turned. He stood in the shadow of the kitchen archway. Tall, but thin. His hair was dark and tousled, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His clothes hung slightly loose, and his eyes, God, his eyes were the kind you don't forget. Sharp. Watchful. Tired. And terrified. "You're Theo," I said quietly. He nodded once. "I told you not to come," he said. "It's not safe." "Then help me understand," I whispered. "Because someone threatened me." "Someone who's not you." He hesitated. Then stepped aside. I followed him into the living room. There, he motioned to a massive corkboard above a battered desk. Newspaper clippings. Photographs. Building blueprints. A headline caught my eye. "Tenant found dead in basement, suspect never caught." A chill rippled through me. "This place," he said softly, "isn't what it seems." Theo told me everything. About the night in 2016 when he'd overheard something horrible, voices in the basement, a scream, then silence. About how he'd tried to report it. How the investigation had been closed without explanation. And how the next week, he received a letter. "You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. Stay quiet or disappear." He stayed inside ever since. Watching. Listening. Collecting proof. "I'm the only one left who knows what happened," he murmured. "Until now." We stared at each other for a long moment. "I believe you," I said finally. But even as I said it, I knew something darker still waited beneath us. Theo's apartment felt like a museum of whispers. Every scrap of paper, every pin on the wall, told a story that no one else was willing to hear. But what haunted me most weren't the clippings or the eerie red strings that connected names and dates across his wall. It was the notebook on the desk. Faded leather. Pages curling at the edges. Inside, Harper's name. Again and again. "She came to me," Theo said softly. 3 weeks before she disappeared. My breath caught. She slipped a note under my door. Said someone had followed her down the stairs late at night. She thought it was a maintenance worker, but something felt wrong. She asked if I ever heard things from the basement. I looked at him, heart tightening. "Did you?" He nodded slowly. "Almost every night." Later that evening, Theo led me into the hallway. It was the first time I'd seen him out there, his eyes flicking to every corner, shoulders tense, like the walls themselves might lunge at him. He stopped near the laundry room door. "There used to be another stairwell," he said. "Blocked off after the fire in 2009. But I think it still leads down." "How do you know?" "I've been listening," he said, voice low. "There are things beneath this building that don't want to be found." We waited until midnight. The hallway was still, save for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak above us. Theo pulled out a rusted key from his pocket. "How did you get that?" I whispered. "I didn't. Harper did. She left it outside my door 2 days before she vanished. Wrapped in a note that said, 'If I don't come back, find the red file.'" We stepped inside the laundry room. It smelled of soap and rust. In the corner, behind a row of dryers, was a narrow metal door, painted the same color as the wall. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Theo slid the key into the lock. A click echoed through the room. And then darkness. The stairwell below was tight, suffocating. The air changed as we descended, colder, stiller, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Dust clung to every surface. At the bottom, the narrow steps opened into a wide concrete room. Shelves. Boxes. Forgotten furniture. And silence. Theo swept his flashlight across a back wall and stopped. A red file box sat on a desk. Alone. I stepped forward and flipped it open. Inside, Polaroids. Stained letters. A cracked phone. Harper's phone. I covered my mouth. This proves she was here. Theo's hands trembled as he lifted a sheet of paper from the file, an old invoice. Cleaning services. Deep basement level. Paid in cash. Over and over again. Why would anyone clean a place no one's allowed in? I asked. He didn't answer. Because we both knew. They were hiding something. Then came the sound. A soft thud. Footsteps above. We froze. Theo grabbed my hand and pulled me behind a stack of crates. My breath snagged in my throat. A flashlight beam danced across the far wall. And then I heard it. A voice. Calm. Familiar. I warned you, Theo. But you just couldn't stay quiet. Mr. Alden. The landlord. His voice echoed off the concrete, too calm for what he had just said. I warned you, Theo. But you just couldn't stay quiet. I held my breath, crouched behind the crates. Theo was beside me, his hand still gripping mine, not for comfort, but for steadiness. His pulse beat in his palm like a second heart. Footsteps. Measured. Intentional. Getting closer. Mr. Alden's flashlight beam schemed across the walls, over shelves stacked with forgotten records and dust-covered memories. It paused near the red file box. A moment of silence. Then a muttered curse. He knew. He knew we'd been here. I always wondered which one of you would be the curious type, he said louder now, addressing the darkness. Harper thought she was clever too. Sticking her nose where it didn't belong. You saw how that turned out. Theo inhaled sharply, almost soundlessly. I squeezed his hand. Mr. Alden turned, steps moving toward the crates now. You know, Theo, I admired your loyalty to silence. I thought you understood the rules. We let you stay for years. Out of pity. Out of respect. The beam swept closer. Then. Too bad she ruined that for you. My chest tightened. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I rose. Stay away from him, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Alden froze. Theo stood slowly behind me. Well, Alden said, eyebrows lifting, lips curling into something twisted. You just couldn't help yourself, could you, Lena? You killed her, I whispered. He tilted his head. She was going to destroy everything. You think the city would protect her? Protect you? No one cares what happens in buildings like this. You disappear, and they forget you existed. Simple as that. You used the basement, Theo said, finally finding his voice. You cleaned up your messes here. Alden's eyes flicked to him. And you should have stayed on your side of the door. He stepped forward. I backed up right into Theo's chest. But Theo didn't move. His voice was low and fierce. You don't scare me anymore. Alden took another step. Then you're a fool. But before he could reach us, I shouted, the police are on their way. It was a lie. My phone was dead. Theo didn't even own one. But Alden hesitated. I seized it. The red file, I said. Harper's phone. Her photos. Her notes. It's all here. Theo moved past me and snatched the file box from the table. If you do anything to us, he said, this goes to every reporter in the city. Alden's jaw clenched. For a moment, he looked less like a predator and more like a man watching a house he built collapse brick by brick. You've ruined everything, he said, voice bitter, venomous. Then he turned and fled up the stairs and into the dark. By the time the police arrived thanks to a call from Mrs. Bale, who heard my scream echo through the vents, Alden was gone. But not for long. The evidence we handed over was enough. They arrested him within 24 hours. And suddenly, everything changed. The story made the news. Other victims came forward. The building was sealed for investigation. Tenants moved out. Reporters knocked. But through it all, Theo stayed. And so did I. The night after the arrest, I sat in Theo's apartment again, surrounded by years of his silence made visible in scraps of paper and ink. Are you okay? I asked gently. He looked out the window, his first time pulling back the curtain. For a long while, he didn't speak. Then he turned to me. I'm not sure I remember how to be outside. I reached for his hand. Then let's relearn it together. He looked down at our fingers intertwined. I never meant for this to happen, he whispered. But I hoped someone like you would come. I smiled softly. Someone who asked too many questions. No, he said. Someone who didn't run when I answered them. A week after the arrest, the building felt hollow. Most tenants had already moved out. Harper's door was sealed with yellow tape. The laundry room sat empty, the hidden stairwell now exposed and guarded. And yet, for the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and open windows, sunlight streaming through the glass like an unfamiliar visitor. I hadn't packed much, I didn't know if I would stay. But I hadn't left. And neither had Theo. He came to my door that afternoon. No note. No scratch of paper. Just a soft knock. I opened it slowly, and there he stood, same tousled hair, same wary eyes but different somehow. Lighter. Like someone had finally lifted the curtain he'd been hiding behind for years. He held something in his hand. Folded paper. But this time, he didn't slide it under the door. He handed it to me, face to face. I unfolded it carefully. For years, I only existed behind walls. I was a ghost in my own life. Then you arrived, noisier than I expected, more persistent than I wanted, and the silence cracked. I don't know how to start over. But if you're willing to stay a little longer, maybe we don't have to do it alone. I looked up at him, eyes stinging. I was hoping you'd write me one more letter, I said softly. Theo smiled, small, genuine, unsure. I'll write you 100 more, he whispered. Then he stepped over the threshold. That evening, we sat in his apartment, ours, maybe someday, with the windows open and the walls stripped of every note, every shadow. They no longer needed to speak for him. He was learning how to speak for himself. He reached for my hand. And for once, neither of us looked at the door. There's a small blue plaque outside 83 Hawthorne Street now. It tells the story of what happened here, of the people who disappeared, and the ones who refused to let them be forgotten. But not all stories are written in bronze or ink. Some are folded in letters, left on doormats, slipped beneath doors at midnight. And some are written in the spaces between two people brave enough to open up. He never spoke to me. But every night, he slid a note under my door. And in those words, I found more than mystery. I found the one person who saw me when I thought I was invisible. If this story moved you even a little, please like or comment, it helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a love story whispered just for you. We're building something special here, a space for stories that speak to the soul. I'm so glad you're part of it.